Today, we're exploring a reversible lace stitch with a strong vertical rib. So I've called it the mesh rib stitch. It's a 4-stitch, 1-row repeat. It looks awesome and it's easy to knit. First, we'll go over the stitch pattern, starting with the cast on and 2 key setup rows. Then I'll explore how the stitch pattern achieves the look of the stitch, including the selve edges. Next, we'll work through the fascinating increase and corresponding decrease to make the fabric seamless and reversible. And lastly, I'll show you the intriguing design elements of this project I made this summer using these techniques. So let's get started. This stitch looks better with 2 easy setup rows, so the mesh section starts cleanly. I'm using a knitted cast on, which I like best for this stitch, but you can of course experiment with different looks. I'm casting on 2 stitches for each repeat, so for 4 repeats, 8 stitches in total. Start with the yarn in the back. The first setup row is worked, yarn over, knit 1, purl 1 for each repeat. One more time, yarn over, knit 1, purl 1. We're increasing 1 stitch for each repeat, so from 2 to 3 for each repeat, and we have 12 stitches on the needle when we're done 4 repeats. The second setup row is similar. Start with the yarn in the back, work yarn over, knit 1, purl 1, and then knit into the yarn over created in the last row. One more time, yarn over, knit 1, purl 1, knit 1. We've increased 1 more stitch for each repeat, so at the end of 4 repeats we'll have 16 stitches on the needle. The selve edge is incorporated into the stitch pattern. Yarn in back, yarn over, knit 2 together, purl 1, knit 1 into the yarn over from the previous row. One more time, yarn over, knit 2 together, purl 1, knit 1. Now the yarn over increase is offset by the knit 2 together decrease, so the total number of stitches doesn't change. I've worked a few more rows so you can see the stitch pattern developing. Because it's a 1-row repeat, it is of course reversible. Let's work 1 more row so we can see how to read our knitting. Yarn in back, yarn over, before the knit 2 together. You can see how the knit 2 together carries the knit rib up from the knit looking stitch in the row below. Now purl into the knit 2 together from the previous row and knit into the yarn over from the previous row. Let's do it one more time. Yarn over before the vertical rib, knit 2 together into the vertical rib, purl into the rib on the other side, knit into the yarn over from the previous row. Now let's explore how these 4 basic knitting stitches work together to create this pleasing fabric. The main reason I like the knitted cast on for this stitch pattern is because it matches the natural selve edge of the stitch. It's not super stretchy though, so for wider pieces you may want to make some adjustments. The yarn over knit 2 together selve edge is a great selve edge in its own right. It makes a great decorative edge that is also stretchy without puckering. The stitch pattern itself is pleasing because of how the mesh and rib sections interact. The lace ladder is created by the offset of the yarn over and knit stitches on each successive row. This is a common technique for stitch patterns in this family, which includes the purse stitch and many others. The video is linked below. Of course, the yarn over that creates the lace ladder requires a decrease of some kind to maintain the stitch count. The vertical knit-looking rib section is created with the knit 2 together, alternating with the purl stitch made on the other side. The loft of the rib section is created due to the thickness of the knit 2 together, and also how the purl stitches tend to sit behind knit stitches when they're next to each other because of their structure. The ribs on each side of the fabric have a similar offset structure as the mesh ladder, which creates the reversible stitch pattern design. Simple, pleasing, and reversible. For the cast off, you can mirror the cast on and setup rows, this time by omitting the yarn over for 1 row, and then using a passover cast off in the pattern for the last row, again omitting the yarn over. An alternative is to decrease the fabric until there's only 1 mesh section left, and that's what we'll talk about next. Because of how the reversibleness of this stitch pattern is achieved, as we discussed above, the technique for a seamless and reversible increase and decrease needs to take this into account. So it's a bit trickier than just adding a stitch here and there. But once you get the idea, it's very doable and the result is worth it. I recommend that you work the pattern until you can read the fabric and the knitting easily, as this will be very helpful. Special thanks to N and P for test knitting the instructions and your moral support. The increase, looking at the fabric, we are forking the rib into two on both sides at the same time. Here's the diagram if that helps. We will increase between the two parts of the rib. The increase is worked over 3 rows, so a stitch marker comes in handy. For the first row, we will split the rib on this side of the fabric. Work in pattern until you get to the knit 2 together where you want the split to happen. Don't forget the yarn over and knit 2 together. Before slipping the stitches off the left needle, yarn over and knit into the 2 stitches again. Now slip the stitches off the left needle. We have increased 2 stitches. Work purl 1, knit 1 in pattern, and place a marker. Continue in pattern for the rest of the row. Turn and continue in pattern until you reach the marker. The second row of the increase, after the marker, work the increase as before. Don't forget the yarn over, knit 2 together, without slipping the stitches off, yarn over and knit into the 2 stitches again. Slip the stitches off, purl 1, knit 1 in the increase from the other side, and place the marker. Then work another purl 1, knit 1, and then continue in pattern for the rest of the row. Turn and continue in pattern until you reach the marker, ending with yarn over, knit 2 together. Now comes the magic to make the increase seamless and reversible. At the marker, we need to change the order of the stitches to get back into the 4-stitch repeat. We have split the rib on this side and split the rib on the other side. Now we need to match them to each other. You can see the first increase we made as the beginning of the split in the rib at the marker. The increase on the other side is right after that, looking like 4 stitches close together. Pick up the 3rd and 4th stitches on the left needle with the right needle at the back of the work. Slide the 4 stitches off the left needle and pick up the 2nd and 1st stitches back onto the left needle, and then slip the 4th and 3rd stitches back. The next 2 stitches in the pattern are purl 1, knit 1. Now yarn over, knit 2 together into the rib, and purl 1, knit 1. Increase finished, and we're back in pattern. After a few more rows, the full effect of the increase takes shape, with the rib split seamlessly on each side of the fabric, and the mesh appearing in between. Isn't that awesome? You can't help it either, yep. The decrease is worked with a similar approach, across 3 rows. For the first row, omit the yarn over in the mesh section between the 2 ribs that will become 1. Place a marker so you can find it on the way back. For the second row, at the marker, omit the knit 1 that would have been worked in the missing yarn over from the previous row, and again omit the yarn over. Knit 2 together, purl 1, knit 1, and place a marker. For the third row, the order of the stitches must be changed as before at the marker. We still need to decrease 2 stitches, so we'll do this here too. On this side of the fabric, we want to combine the first 2 stitches from the right rib with the left rib, which is the 4th stitch on the left needle. At the same time, we want to combine the ribs on the other side. So slip the first 2 stitches on the left needle to the right needle, purlwise, then switch the 3rd and 4th stitches so the rib on this side is on top. Then put all the stitches back on the left needle and work as follows. Don't forget the yarn over. Knit 3 together instead of 2. Purl 2 together instead of 1. And knit the yarn over from the previous row. This decreases the last 2 stitches. Now we're back in pattern having decreased 4 stitches in total, which is 1 whole repeat. 2 quick notes before we look at all of this in the project. For the decrease, then knit 3 together and purl 2 together will create right-leaning decreases. Depending on your vision for your project, you may want to change these to left-leaning decreases by using slip 2 together knitwise, slip another knitwise, and knit 3 through the back loop. And for the purl, a slip, slip, purl, also through the back loop. If you know of other ways to work the increases or decreases, I'm very interested. Please feel free to leave a comment. For projects using this stitch pattern, notice that an even number of pattern repeats, like 4 in the swatch, creates an even number of knit-looking ribs and an odd number of internal mesh sections. The 4th mesh section is effectively split between the 2 selve edges. So if you're looking to create fabric with a central mesh column, make sure to use an even number of repeats, or 1 more than the number of mesh columns you want. I wanted to start with a narrow point of just 1 mesh panel and increase slowly to the full width. So I started with 2 pattern repeats, so just 4 cast-on stitches, then the 2 setup rows, and 8 rows of stitch pattern. The layout of the increases, or decreases, there are countless variations. For this project, I decided to increase one of the edge ribs slowly at regular intervals, in this case every 12 rows, until I had 16 ribs. The other edge of the scarf continues straight up. Of course, any rib can be increased at any time. For example, I could have alternated edges of the work so both edges scalloped a bit, or increase the middle ribs instead so the ribs flare out in a V shape, or a different regular pattern across the ribs, or even randomly. Let me know in the comments what your vision is. On the other end of the scarf, full disclosure, I was running out of yarn and the scarf wasn't very long, so I had to do something different on the other end than I had originally thought. So I decided to make use of the 16 ribs and decreased to half and half and half. So I had 2 ribs left, and then made a loop for the other end. The main reason I'm mentioning this is that you can see that the drastic decrease makes the fabric not quite flat, because each decrease is 4 stitches. The same will happen if you increase too fast. Fewer increases or decreases can be absorbed by the fabric better. In this case, I actually like it, because it makes a rounded pocket. The end result is a unique piece that shows off the stitch pattern, the increases, decreases, and hugs the shoulder nicely. The next video will be on a related stitch, which I've called the twisted rib mesh stitch. I like it because it works great with variegated yarn, which can be tricky for reversible stitches. So in the works for the fall are finally some Mobius project videos. So pick up your knitting and create something awesome. I'll do my best to respond to comments, and I'd love to hear about your favorite reversible knitting pattern. Also feel free to like this video and subscribe to my channel for more awesome reversible knitting. You still here? The last few years I've been working hard to find simple ways to feel better, what I call my daily well-being practices. This is not medical advice, I'm just sharing what works for me. Just a short one today. I'm one of those people that has problems getting up in the morning, especially getting dressed. If I can get away with it, I'll hang around in my PJs all day. So in order to help my future self, I find if I choose and set out my clothes the night before, then it's one less thing I need to think about. Have a great day. Just in case you're interested, this yarn is called Tandem by Westwool that I found at the Stephen and Penelope yarn shop near Amsterdam Centraal Station. Then I designed and knitted the project in Scotland and Ireland this summer. I met N and P while touring the islands. We spent many mornings knitting together.